Alright, this podcast is to give you a better understanding of what Socratic Circles are, how they work, and what you need to do in order to be able to be ready for your next Socratic Circle discussion. So, Socratic Circles, they are a technique, as their name implies, originated by Socrates. Socrates seen here, the old gadfly himself. And Socrates, one of his famous quotes is that the unexamined life is not worth living. He thought that questioning above all things was of the most dire importance. Now, he thought that this questioning was so important, in fact, that it was more important for his students to learn how to question than they were to be able to memorize the right answers. He was all about questioning throughout his life. Now that really informs what a Socratic dialogue or Socratic discussion is, in fact, in terms of class. It is dialogue focused, dialogue meaning two or more speaking. The big goal here is to get a sense of shared meaning. The group should come to some kind of consensus understanding if things are at their utmost and we're being successful. Questioning is mutual. It is not an interrogation of one or a set small group of people interrogating others. This questioning is mutual and non-threatening. Text is for examination. It's not for pedestals. We don't call anything art with a capital A. Questions can and will be asked of everything. The biggest thing here is that it's student-controlled discussion. If a Socratic Circle discussion is working well, I, as a teacher, should not have to say anything other than simple timekeeping, housekeeping kinds of things. This should be your discussion. It should be your time. Hopefully you make the most of it. So, in order to help kind of cement this understanding of what a Socratic Circle discussion is, it's important to review the difference between discussion as it would be compared to something like debate. Now, in discussion, really what we want to do is we want to be finding meaning. That should be our goal here. Should we be striving to find meaning? Also, we should be listening, but we should be listening to try and understand where someone else is coming from, what their viewpoint is. Now, if there are assumptions on the part of anybody speaking, the assumptions, it's okay to evaluate them. It's okay to say, well, why do you believe that? Where do you come from when you're saying these things? And really, the discussion itself is flexible in nature. It'll meander, it'll go back and forth into things and come back around to things that we talked about before. That's just fine. It doesn't have a rigid, turn-taking kind of thing at place. Now, debate is far different, and sometimes students confuse the two. Now, we're having a Socratic Circle discussion. We're not having a debate. In debate, we're striving to prove a point. You've got a side that you're on, and you want to prove that, and you want to be right. That's not what we're doing with Socratic Circle discussion. In a debate, you listen to find the flaws of your opponent, and really, that isn't helpful here. Not if we're going after that shared meaning and understanding. Now, in a debate, if you have assumptions, they're to be defended. They're to be the underpinnings of what you believe and what your side believes, and they are not to be questioned. And their debate is very rigid in nature. There's a very set turn-taking kind of style with that, and that's not what we're doing here. So it's important to note the difference between those two things. Now, the procedure. How do we do this? How is this going to work for you in class? What's it going to be like? Well, the first thing is they're concentric circles, meaning there will be an inner circle, usually a group of students chosen at random, seated center of the room, and there'll be an outer circle. Now, the outer circle will be at desks so they can both listen and they can kind of oversee what's going on with the inner circle. Now, the inner circle will start. They will begin with a selected passage or a quote, either chosen by myself or chosen by one of you, hopefully. Now, the discussion should be focusing on the exchange of questions and thoughts. It shouldn't just be question, answer. It should be, what things do we need to go back on? What do we need to delve into more deeply? Now, there's the thing here we need to focus on is that back channeling does occur while the inner circle is talking. Now, back channeling is when we use any kind of discussion forum, today's Meet, Google Moderator, Twitter, things like that. Live blogging even happens. But it's basically so that audience members can ask questions of a presentation or presenter in real time. As it comes into their head, they can put these questions down, and then hopefully those presenting can address them and access them in the moment. Now, if you're back channeling a Google Moderator, which our first one will be, you need to both submit an idea and vote on ideas. If we're using something like today's Meet or Twitter, you just need to submit at least one comment in order to be counted for participation. Now, all the while, the outer circle is watching what the inner circle is doing. They are back channeling. Now, once time is called, the inner circle, they are done. They have to fall silent. So does the back channeling stop for the outer circle. The outer circle, then we review that back channel, and we critique, noting both what did we like, what was interesting, what didn't the inner circle talk about, what should the next inner circle talk about. Now, after that full review is done, well, then the circle switches places. Now, once that switch is done, we now repeat the discussion procedure, but now who was outer circle, they are inner, who is inner is outer, and the back channel really then is focused on generating takeaways, what do we still need to look at, as well as the previous back channel drives what the new inner circle gets to talk about. So what makes this work? How does this generate in terms of an activity? How does this work in terms of behaviors that make it something worthwhile and gives you something that you want to take away things from class? The first and foremost, you have to listen to each other. I understand that adults don't always often listen to teenagers enough, and I think teenagers are right to say that. But you need to be able to listen to each other. I cannot stress that enough. Listen to each other. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Really listen. Really review the selected text. And I don't mean just read and prepare. Really look over what you create to prepare for this and look over the focus items. I would say if you've got a thorough background piece prepared, you should have several questions on a variety of topics and be ready to go to discuss. Really, the best questions are the ones that don't get answered by a simple yes or no. If they get answered by a simple word or a name or a yes-no kind of thing, well, then it's not going to really generate any other discussion. It's not going to drive things to any greater understanding. Ask questions like, why did a character do this? What do we think about the actions of a character? Do we agree with the decisions of a character? Put in those opinion pieces at the very least, and then that'll help have a better discussion. Really look at, when you're the outer circle, look at what they did well, but also look at what they didn't talk about, because we want this to be as comprehensive a review as possible. The hardest thing for a lot of students to understand with this is that when you come away with more questions, that's okay. That's just fine. Now, what can you create for this? What can you do to get ready for this discussion? In order to really be ready for this discussion, we want to have some kind of a background product created to show that both you've done your work, but also that you've made a choice and kind of bring your own unique thing to the discussion. So really, what can you create in terms of this background work? Well, you have a couple options. The first is an etymology focus, or a word focus. What we want there is that you find a word that's important to the chapter or the division of the text, whatever it is that we've decided for that given discussion, and you want to explain how does this term really help shape your understanding. What does this term mean to what's going on? A good thing to do here is to go both into the definition, but also go beyond simple metaphor with this and really talk about like big thematic things with this. It might be a word that we know. It might be a definition that we're very familiar with, but how do you apply it? That's the big thing. Maybe there's something in the way that this word is generated in terms of what is put together for this word that's very interesting and maybe even reflects something about the passage that we've read. That could be it too. But you need to have the word, have it defined, talk about how it works in the passage, and then how does it shape your understanding. So really a threefold focus on that. You could have a question focus also. So maybe the word focus isn't your thing. Question focus might be what you want to do. And for that, you want to generate multiple questions, at least 3, from multiple focus items here. So look over those focus items or come up with your own stuff and really ask questions both about what you got out of it, but also what you're still curious about, what you're still wanting to hear from your peers, and maybe they could help you answer that you're wanting to hear about. And the last one is an illusion focus, or a connection focus. This is another thing that, another way we can conceptualize that. Is you want to connect 3 or more aspects of the text to something else, some other text that you might have read or watched. Now, it's important to note that the aspects of the text, that could be character actions, that could be things that characters say, that could be events, or it could just be things in terms of description, characterization, things that are more subtle. So it doesn't just have to be such a literal level type of connection. It is important, though, to use text that your peers will know. Don't use something that's very obscure. Use things that are very accessible so that it can help generate discussion, but also that everybody will kind of know where you're coming from with that. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what you need to do for working with Socratic circles and how this procedure will work when we have them in class.